On August 19th, a wallet called pensionusdt.eth held a short position on 50,000 Ether, roughly $106 million, held for more than 2 months. It closed in 12 seconds, not by choice, and not at one price, at 4. 21.93, 22.09, 22.14, 22.36. Each fill worse than the last. The position's own exit moved the market $43 against it. That is not bad luck. That is how the machine is built. So let's take the machine apart. Start with the part that trips people up. To open a short, you sell an asset you don't own. To close it, you have to acquire it back. There is no other exit. So when an exchange liquidates a short, it does not sell, it buys, forcibly, at market, immediately. Here's the trigger. A perpetual futures position is backed by collateral. Against that sits a maintenance margin, the minimum equity the position has to keep. On Hyperliquid, that floor scales with the leverage tier, about 1.25% of notional on the highest leverage assets, up to 16.7% on the lowest. As the mark price rises, a short's unrealized loss grows and its equity falls. When equity crosses the maintenance floor, the account stops being the trader's. The liquidation engine takes the position and closes it. Conviction, thesis, and 2 months of patience are irrelevant at that moment. The only input is the mark price. Now the part that explains the 4 prices. An order book is not a price. It's a queue of resting orders at rising levels. A market order consumes the cheapest offers first, then the next, then the next. 50,000 Ether is not a click. At those levels, it's over $100 million of demand arriving inside a few seconds against a book that was never sized for it. So the engine walks up the ladder. 21.93, 22.09, 22.14, 22.36. Every level it consumes makes the rest of the position more expensive to close because the loss on a short is measured against exactly the price its own demand just created. And it still didn't finish. 1,417 Ether was left over, and it went to Hyperliquid's backstop vault. That's by design. Hyperliquid unwinds in 2 stages. First through the open book, and if equity falls below 2/3 of the maintenance margin before the book absorbs the position, a liquidator vault takes the remainder onto its own balance sheet. The book had run out of willing counterparties at a solvent price.
Now, scale that up. Every forced purchase prints a price. Every printed price becomes the mark that every other account on the venue is measured against, which means one liquidation is an input to the next. On August 19th, that loop ran across the entire market. Just under $3 billion closed out in 24 hours, across more than 170,000 accounts, 8th largest on record. Look at the split. Shorts, 2.74 billion. Longs, 255 million. Shorts were about 92% of everything closed, a ratio of nearly 11 to 1. Bitcoin accounted for 1.42 billion of it. Ether, 1.13 billion. More than $1 billion of Bitcoin shorts closed in roughly 1 hour. Think about what that means for the tape. For a stretch of that day, the single largest source of demand in the market was not an investor forming a view. It was a margin engine executing a rule.
So what caused it? The headlines pointed at catalysts. The Treasury signaling it would at least double its long-dated bond buybacks. A White House meeting with crypto executives. Momentum on market structure legislation. Real events, and they moved price first. But a catalyst explains a spark. It does not explain a $3 billion fire. For that, you need fuel. And the fuel was positioning that had been stacking up for weeks. 2 tells. First, funding. On August 19th, average perpetual funding sat near plus 0.0022% per 8 hours, roughly 2.4% annualized. That is close to neutral. One side was not crowded and paying up for it. Second, open interest. Price rose while open interest stayed flat to lower. Fresh positions opening increases open interest. Positions closing decreases it. Falling open interest into a rising price is the fingerprint of covering, not of new demand. So here's what the mechanism actually tells you. A record move is not a record of demand. Those are two different measurements, and on August 19th, they pointed in opposite directions. Price up sharply, positions closing in size, open interest declining. The move was real. Most of the demand behind it was involuntary. If you read this market as a system rather than a scoreboard, the useful instruments are not the headline percentage. They're the direction of open interest against price, funding as the running cost of carry, and where leverage has stacked up, because that is where the fuel sits. And one last structural note. We can narrate those 12 seconds, 5 fills, 4 prices, 1,417 ether to the vault, only because Hyperliquid settles on a public ledger. Run the identical event on a venue that publishes nothing, and it is just an unexplained candle with a story attached afterward. The transparency is the difference between a mechanism and a rumor.